I'm Lily, a florist with a small shop downtown. It's not much, but it's mine. Flowers have always been my thing, they don't talk back, and they're a hell of a lot simpler than people. It was just another gray afternoon when he walked into my life. The door chimed and in came this guy, looking like he'd just come from a corporate battlefield, tie askew, and hair slightly damp from rain. He paused by the entrance, scanning the colorful chaos of my shop, before his eyes settled on me. "Hey, I need a bouquet, something that says, 'I'm sorry I forgot Mother's Day again this year,'" he said with a half-embarrassed, half-amused grin. "Right," I chuckled, sizing him up. "You look like you could use all the help you can get." He laughed, a genuine sound that made me smile as I picked out some lilies and roses. "I'm Jack, by the way." "Lily," I replied, hands busy with the stems. As I arranged the bouquet, we chatted about everything and nothing. He worked in finance, lived a couple of blocks away, and yes, he was notoriously bad at remembering important dates. "Here," I said, handing him the finished bouquet, full of whites and pinks. "This should earn you some forgiveness." He smiled, that slow, charming smile that had probably won over tougher crowds than me. "Can I take you out for a coffee then? As a thank you." We exchanged phones to punch in our details, his fingers brushing against mine as he handed it back. Something fluttered in my chest, a little like the excitement I felt when a new shipment of exotic flowers came in. A few days later, we met at a cozy little cafe halfway between his office and my shop. It was a quiet place, the kind with mismatched furniture and a chalkboard menu. We found a spot by the window, rain streaking down the glass outside, a perfect backdrop to a slow, easy conversation. We talked about everything, movies we liked, books we'd read, places we wanted to travel. It was surprising how easy it was to talk to him, how much we had in common, despite our different paths. "So, how about a real date?" Jack asked as we stepped outside, a hopeful note in his voice. "Dinner, maybe?" I smiled, feeling that flutter again, stronger this time. "I'd like that. Yes." As I walked back to my shop, my heart felt lighter than it had in ages. I was happy, truly happy, and I had a feeling things were only going to get better from here. A year flies by when you're in love. Jack and I tied the knot in a quiet ceremony, surrounded by our closest friends and family. His parents, Sarah and George, were beaming the whole time, except for Jack's sister, Susan. She managed a smile, but her eyes didn't quite match the gesture. Jack and I settled into married life easily. We visited his folks often, as they lived just a few blocks over. I loved those visits. His mom and I would spend hours chatting over tea, or we'd go shopping. George was battling cancer, and as his health worsened, I tried to be there more, helping out any way I could. As George's condition worsened, I found myself driving over to their place more often, helping Sarah with the house and spending time with George when he felt up to it. One afternoon, while Sarah and I were returning from a walk, Susan pulled up in her flashy car, a scowl already forming as she saw me. "Here again, Lily? Planning to move in or just making sure you're in the will?" she snapped as soon as she stepped out. "Susan, that's enough," Sarah chided gently, but Susan brushed her off. "No, Mom, it's not enough. She's here all the time, cozying up to you, playing the good daughter-in-law. What's the end game, Lily? Trying to make sure we don't forget about you when the time comes?" I felt my face heat up with anger, but I kept my voice even. "Susan, I'm here because your family is now my family too. I care about your mom and your dad, just like Jack does. This isn't about money or whatever else you're imagining." She just snorted, shaking her head as she walked past us into the house. Sarah gave me an apologetic look. "Don't mind her, dear. She's always been a bit direct. We know why you're here, and we appreciate it. Don't let her get to you." We tried to carry on like normal, but Susan's visits became more frequent, her comments sharper. She'd critique everything from how I helped in the kitchen to how I decorated our home. It was like walking on eggshells whenever she was around. When George passed away, it was a tough time for all of us. I was heartbroken, not just for myself, but for Jack and Sarah, and even for Susan, though she seemed to handle it all with a stiff upper lip. I threw myself into supporting Sarah, accompanying her on her errands, and just being there whenever she needed to talk. One day, after helping Sarah sort through some of George's things, Susan cornered me in the living room. "You're always here, Lily. Don't you have your own home to go to?" "Susan, stop. I'm here for your mom, not for any other reason. Can't you see she's hurting? Or are you too busy looking for problems where there aren't any?" I was tired of her accusations, tired of defending myself. Walking out of that room, I felt a mix of frustration and sadness. It wasn't easy, dealing with her constant hostility. But I loved Jack, and I loved his parents. No amount of snide remarks would change that. It was a brisk evening when we all gathered at Sarah's house for what I thought was just another family dinner. After we had settled in with our plates heaping with food, Sarah cleared her throat, signaling she had something important to say. "I'd like to read George's will." He wanted us all to hear it together. The room went quiet, all eyes on Sarah as she unfolded the papers with a shaky hand. Jack reached over to give her a reassuring squeeze on her shoulder. Susan and her husband, Rick, leaned in, anticipation written all over their faces. "George left half of his estate to me," Sarah began, her voice steady despite the palpable tension, "and the other half he has left to his future grandchildren." A moment of silence followed. I glanced at Jack, whose face was a mixture of sadness and resolve. He nodded slightly at me, as if to say we'd figure this out together. "Well, that's a pretty forward-thinking move," I commented, trying to keep the mood light. "Ensuring the kids have something is really thoughtful." Susan, on the other hand, didn't take it so lightly. "So, basically, Rick and I need to hurry up and have kids," she blurted out, half joking, half serious. "It's not a race, Susan," Jack said, trying to soothe the sudden tension. But for Susan, it seemed to become exactly that, a race. Over the next few months, her efforts to conceive became her main focus. She talked incessantly about doctor's appointments and fertility treatments at every family gathering. It was clear this quest was taking a toll on her. One Sunday lunch, as we all dug into dessert, Susan launched into a detailed account of their latest visit to the fertility clinic. "You wouldn't believe how much we've spent already," she complained, spooning another large piece of cake onto her plate. "It's like a full-time job, this whole getting pregnant thing." As the months rolled on, Susan's frustration only grew. Despite her efforts, pregnancy remained elusive. At a particularly low point, after her third unsuccessful attempt at artificial insemination, she broke down during a family barbecue. "It's not fair," she cried out, tears streaming down her face as she sat slumped in a patio chair. "Why is this happening to me? I'm trying everything, and nothing works." "It's going to be okay, Susan." Sarah tried to console her, rubbing her back. "These things take time. Maybe you're putting too much pressure on yourself." But Susan was beyond consolation. "You don't understand, Mom. It's not just about having a baby. It's about Dad's will, about securing our future. I need this." The desperation in her voice was heartbreaking. Jack and I exchanged looks, both of us feeling helpless. We knew how much she wanted this, how it had consumed her. It was another one of those communal dinners at Sarah's house. These gatherings had become more strained than soothing, especially with Susan's increasing demands and deteriorating demeanor. As we all sat down, the air was thick with the scent of roast beef and the undercurrents of unspoken tensions. Just as we were about to start eating, Susan clinked her glass, standing with a bit of a struggle due to her now prominent belly. "I have an announcement," she declared, her voice tinged with a mix of triumph and challenge. "I'm pregnant, finally," she beamed, rubbing her belly. The table erupted in congratulations, everyone expressing their joy and relief, but I noticed the smug look she shot me as she continued. "And once the baby arrives, Dad's money will go to where it rightfully belongs, my child." Her words, especially the way she looked at me when she said them, felt like a slap. Jack squeezed my hand under the table, a silent signal not to rise to the bait. "That's wonderful news, Susan. I managed to say, keeping my voice steady despite the irritation bubbling inside. Yeah, isn't it? Susan smirked. It's just so perfect. Now everything's falling into place. As the dinner progressed, Susan's demeanor became more unbearable. She demanded special attention for her dietary needs and wouldn't let anyone forget for a minute that she was carrying the family's future heir. Could you pass the salt? Oh wait, no, I shouldn't. Doctor's orders, she'd say, then launch into a detailed account of her latest doctor's visit, fishing for more sympathy. Jack and Sarah were endlessly patient with her, but I could see the strain on their faces. Later, when I helped Sarah clear the dishes while the others sat digesting both the meal and Susan's news, she whispered, "I'm sorry, Lily. I know she can be a bit much." Her attitude only worsened over the months. Her pregnancy seemed to embolden her, giving her new ammunition to use against me. She critiqued everything from the way I dressed. "Don't you think that skirt's a bit tight for a family dinner, Lily?" To how much time I spent at work, "Must be nice, caring more about flowers than family." Each visit left me more drained than the last. I started making excuses to avoid these family gatherings, much to Jack's dismay. "I know she's tough, but she's still my sister. We need to show some unity, especially now," he'd argue. But it was hard. Hard to sit there and be the target of Susan's sharp tongue, hard to watch her turn what should have been a happy time into a series of battles, each one chipping away at the family's foundations. One quiet afternoon, when I thought I had the house to myself, I overheard Susan talking to Rick in the kitchen. "Once this baby is born, things are going to change around here. I'll make sure of it." Her words chilled me. It wasn't just about the inheritance anymore, it was about control, about reshaping the family dynamics to her whims. Life has a funny way of throwing you curveballs when you least expect it. One such curveball came my way on an ordinary Thursday morning. I hadn't been feeling right for a few days, nausea washing over me in waves, a weird aversion to coffee, and on a hunch, I bought a pregnancy test. When the 2 pink lines appeared, my heart did a little dance. I was pregnant. Barely containing my excitement, I waited for Jack to come home from work. The moment he walked through the door, I blurted out, "Guess what? We're going to have a baby." Jack's eyes widened, his briefcase hitting the floor with a thud as he rushed over to hug me. "Seriously? Oh my God, that's amazing, Lily." We spent the evening in our little bubble of happiness, but soon it was time to confirm things professionally. After a visit to the doctor and the positive results in hand, we decided it was time to share the news with Sarah. We planned a visit the following weekend, hoping for a joyful family gathering. As we pulled up to Sarah's house, butterflies fluttered in my stomach. The news of our growing family felt like a beacon of joy amidst the usual tension with Susan. When we walked in, we were surprised to find Susan there too, her belly now quite prominent. "Mom, we have some great news," Jack started, beaming as he took my hand. Sarah's face lit up with anticipation. "What is it, dear?" I smiled, feeling the warmth of the moment. "I'm pregnant, Sarah. You're going to have another grandchild." Sarah clasped her hands together, tears brimming in her eyes. "Oh, my dears, that's wonderful. I'm so happy for you both." But as we turned to Susan, the atmosphere shifted. Her face drained of color, her lips tightening into a thin line. "This is convenient, isn't it?" Susan's voice was sharp, her eyes flickering with anger. "And how do we even know it's true? For all we know, she could be making it up to get a piece of the inheritance. We should have a DNA test. Who knows if it's even Jack's?" Jack stepped between us, his body tense. "Don't you dare accuse Lily of such things. She's your sister-in-law, and she deserves your respect, not your conspiracy theories." Susan scoffed. "Respect? She's nothing but a gold digger. Watch, she'll probably give birth to some freak." That was the last straw. Tears spilled down my cheeks, the hurt too deep to contain. Jack wrapped his arm around me, his own face a mask of anger and disbelief. "Apologize to her, now," he demanded, but Susan just rolled her eyes. "I'm not feeling well. I need to go home," she muttered, avoiding our gazes as she grabbed her purse and stormed out. Sarah hurried over to us, her expression apologetic. I'm so sorry, my dears. Please don't mind her. She's been under a lot of stress, and the hormones, they're making her a bit more. It's not just the hormones, Mom, Jack said quietly. It's her. And it's getting out of hand. Sarah nodded sadly, her eyes filled with worry. I know, Jack. I'll talk to her. But for now, let's focus on this beautiful news. Lily, my dear, I'm so thrilled for you both. As we sat down to a quieter dinner, the earlier excitement dampened by Susan's outburst, I tried to focus on the positive. I was going to be a mother, and no amount of spite from Susan could take away the joy of that realization. When Jack's mother invited me over for morning coffee and mentioned she had baked my favorite blueberry pie, I couldn't resist. I arrived at Sarah's home, to the comforting aroma of fresh coffee and pie. To my surprise, Susan was there too. The atmosphere was oddly calm, a stark contrast to our last encounter. She even managed a small smile as I walked in. Lily, I want to apologize for last time, Susan said, her voice lower than usual. I was out of line. It shouldn't have happened. I was taken aback by her sudden change in demeanor, but decided to take the high road. Thank you, Susan. I appreciate that. Let's just put it behind us. We sat down at the kitchen table, and Sarah served the pie and poured the coffee. The pie was as delicious as I remembered, and for a moment, it felt like things might actually be okay. But halfway through, a sharp headache pierced through my temples. Ugh, I've got a terrible headache all of a sudden, I murmured, rubbing my forehead. Oh, I have something for that, Susan quickly said, getting up from her seat. It's totally safe for pregnancy. I'll get it for you. She returned with a pill and a glass of water, her hand steady, her eyes watching me closely. Here, this will help. I hesitated for a moment, looking at the small white pill in her hand. Something felt off, but my throbbing head pushed those thoughts away. I thanked her and swallowed the pill, hoping for relief. After a few minutes, my headache didn't subside. Instead, a wave of nausea overcame me. I think I need to rinse my glass, I said, standing unsteadily. In the kitchen, as I washed the glass, my gaze caught on something in the trash bag. My heart stopped when I saw the packaging. It was unmistakably the type of medicine George used during his chemotherapy. Panic surged through me as I remembered the dire warnings about such drugs and their effects on pregnancy. My hands shaking, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. I think I've taken something dangerous for my pregnancy, I said as soon as the operator picked up. Ma'am, you need to try to vomit immediately to prevent any more absorption into your system, the operator instructed urgently. I dropped the phone and turned to the sink, drinking cups of water rapidly before forcing myself to throw up. It was horrible, the feeling of panic mixed with the physical strain, but I kept going until I felt I couldn't anymore. From the other room, I could hear the muffled sounds of Sarah asking, Lily, are you all right in there? I didn't answer, my focus solely on what the operator had told me. I kept drinking water, kept trying to clear whatever I had ingested from my system. Stumbling out of the bathroom, my hands still trembling and my heart pounding, I found Sarah and Susan waiting anxiously. Their faces were etched with concern, or in Susan's case, something that flickered suspiciously like fear. I need quiet right now, I managed to say, my voice hoarse from the ordeal. Please, just, no questions. Without waiting for their response, I pulled out my phone and dialed Jack. His voice was a lifeline as I recounted the terrifying discovery and my subsequent actions. I'm calling the police, Lily, he said firmly. Stay there. They'll be with you shortly. The moment Susan heard the word police, her face lost all color. You're making a scene over nothing, she snapped, her voice rising. You're just trying to get attention. Enough, Susan. Sarah's voice cracked like a whip. What did you give to Lily? Just paracetamol, Mom, Susan replied, her voice shaky, eyes darting around nervously. Nothing harmful. I cut in, my patience worn thin. then explained the chemotherapy drugs in the trash. That's not paracetamol. Susan's eyes widened, and she made a move toward the kitchen, perhaps to hide or dispose of the evidence, but it was too late. The sound of sirens filled the air, and within moments, police officers were at the door. I told them everything, from the suspicious pill to my alarming discovery. They listened intently, taking notes, their expressions grim. One officer held up the package of medication I had found. "We'll need to check this for fingerprints," he said, sealing it in an evidence bag. Susan stood by, pale and silent. When the ambulance arrived, I was whisked away to the hospital for a thorough medical examination, leaving the house under a cloud of unanswered questions and unspoken accusations. Over the next couple of days, the police worked swiftly. Susan was detained after her fingerprints were found all over the medication packaging. During the interrogation, she initially stuck to her story, claiming, "I just touched those meds when I was in Dad's room once." But Sarah dismantled her defense with a few cold facts. "Those drugs were always kept in a locked cabinet," she told the police, her voice steady despite the emotional weight of her words. Susan never went in there until that day. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Susan finally broke down and confessed. "I just wanted to make sure the inheritance was secure. I didn't think it would go this far," she sobbed, her facade crumbling. The confession was a small solace in the storm of emotions. Betrayal, fear, and relief mingled within me, leaving me exhausted but grateful that the truth had come to light. As the dust settled from the whirlwind of police investigations and hospital visits, more shocking revelations came to light, each one more unbelievable than the last. It turned out that Susan had never been pregnant at all. She had fooled everyone with a prosthetic belly, plotting to eventually adopt a child from another state to pass off as her own. Her plan was to secure her share of her father's inheritance under false pretenses. Her husband, Rick, was blindsided by the deception. "I don't understand how she could do this," he confessed to me one afternoon, his voice heavy with betrayal. "She kept saying intimacy could harm the baby, so I believed her. I listened, offering a sympathetic ear, though inside, my emotions were a tangled mess of relief and anger. Relief that my baby was safe and anger at the lengths Susan had gone to. Thankfully, the doctors confirmed that my quick actions had prevented any harm to my unborn child. The relief that flooded through me was indescribable. Jack and I held each other in the hospital, our bond deepening in the face of adversity, our future as a family looking bright again. However, Susan's fate took a darker turn. She was convicted of attempting to harm me and sentenced to 3 years in prison. At Sarah's insistence, the courts also adjusted George's will, effectively disinheriting Susan. This meant she could no longer claim any part of her father's estate, regardless of any future children she might have. The fallout was severe. Sarah, heartbroken but resolute, distanced herself from her daughter, focusing on healing the family that remained. Rick, feeling betrayed and disgusted, filed for divorce and cut all ties with Susan. A few months later, our little bundle of joy arrived, a beautiful, healthy daughter who was the spitting image of Jack. Holding her in my arms, every struggle seemed worth it to reach this moment of pure happiness. We decided to save the inheritance money for her education and any future siblings she might have. But peace was short-lived. Shortly after Susan's release, she reached out to me, her voice desperate over the phone. "Lily, I know I've made mistakes, but I need help. The inheritance, I don't have anything left." I held the phone tightly, my other hand instinctively cradling my daughter, who was nestled against my chest. "Susan, after everything that happened, I can't do this. I have to think about my family now." Without waiting for her response, I ended the call and blocked her number. Jack stood by the doorway, having overheard the conversation. He walked over and put his arm around us. "Are you okay?" he asked, his brow furrowed in concern. "Yeah, I am now," I replied, gazing down at our daughter who gurgled happily, oblivious to the complexities around her. "Good, because we're all that matters. You, me, her, and any future little ones." We're a family, and nothing's going to change that," he said, kissing the top of our daughter's head gently. As we stood there, a family united, the weight of the past seemed to lift, leaving room only for the future we would build together, a future filled with love, security, and the promise of new beginnings.